So as Valerie said, I represent athletes' off-field interests. So I have a unique background that allows me to understand the perspective of high-level athletes, whether they're professional, they're going to go into the professional ranks, or they're Olympians. Growing up, the athlete in my family was my sister. She was an Olympic-level gymnast and on the USA national team from 1989 to 1994. And so that's the era of Kim Zmeskal. Some of you are too young. Kim Zmeskal, Carrie Strug, she's the one that injured her ankle on the vault in Atlanta and won the gold medal. She lived in her basement for like a month and a half. Shannon Miller, all these girls that won gold in Atlanta, my sister grew up with all of them. In fact, she was the mentor to many of them. And so high-level sports was something that wasn't foreign to me. It's just I didn't have the ability. I played amateur sports, but my sister wasn't playing. She was doing. And there was a big difference between her practices and mine, where we'd go get ice cream afterwards, and she'd have another practice afterwards. And so very early, I got to see how sports at a high level was concerned. I spent a good portion of my childhood at the U.S. Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, which is home to the Olympic Committee, with my sister competing there, training there, having medical stuff taken care of there. Meanwhile, I'm running around underneath the bleachers watching USA boxing and the USA swimming and track and field and all of these things in the 80s and 90s with superior athletes. And I didn't think twice about it because it's my sister. Like, gosh, how dorky can that be? Can we just go home? Looking back on it, I should have taken more advantage of that opportunity. My sports background, I got cut from my high school baseball team. This is how most umpires get started. Be a very bad baseball player, and if you want to stay on the field, you either do that or coach. And I don't think I was ready to be a coach at 16, but I knew that I wanted to do something, and so for a summer job, I started umpiring and loved it. Had no idea what I was doing. They handed me a rule book and said, call us if you have any questions, here's your schedule. And so by the time I was out of high school, I was working high school games, just not with the school district I was in. And somebody one day said, hey, you should go to umpire school. Great, what's that? And so I went to umpire school. It's 5 weeks in Florida in January. They start with, this is a baseball, this is what it's made out of, and you have a test the next day. They're made in Costa Rica, by the way. Wool and yarn, cushion, cork, center. I go on. And then the last week, they're talking about how you handle situations when the lights go out and the sprinklers turn on, an illegal glove, an illegal ball, and a bat that's broken hits a ball and it hits the base, and then a gopher eats it, and then what do you do? Then you have a protest. What do you do? And you learn how to handle these things. I was fortunate enough to get selected to get a job in the minor leagues, and I bounced around for 5 years, worked in a number of leagues, and it was every day on the road. It was, I left the house March 11th. All right, take that back. I left the house March 10th. I'd get to Tucson early the morning of the 11th, and I'd report to spring training, which means I'd drop my bags off. It's reporting to spring training, you should drop your bags off. And then I would get home September 19th, sometimes the 27th. Never go home. That's a different part of sports entirely when you're on the field, because what we see from the seats is how much fun that could be, because we have that experience of playing or even in the front yard just recreationally. These guys take every at-bat very seriously, because the difference between a 299 hitter and a 300 hitter in minor league baseball going to major league baseball could be millions of dollars. One hit a week makes you a 250 hitter or a 300 hitter. It's a big difference. It's also time away from your family. You're not making very much money in the minor leagues. And I've seen guys get the phone call in the middle of batting practice where they're just outside the locker room finding out that their wife has just filed for divorce. And they have to go pitch that day. Good luck. It's usually in August that these things happen, where they're gone. Everybody's stressed out. He calls home. His ERA is a 6. And he calls and she goes, well, you're not home. How are you going to help with the math homework? And then the yelling starts. Everybody's in the right. He's frustrated. She's frustrated. The kids are frustrated. This is the life of a professional athlete. For me, I wasn't so worried about it. I had a guaranteed contract. They weren't going to fire me in August. They might fire me in November, but I didn't have to worry. My job was to get things right, but I didn't have to worry about a batting average. I didn't have to like a manager liking somebody else more. And so I bounced around. I was in a contract year, and umpires have contract years, 2-year deals at a time, and it cost $3,200 more to keep me than it did to keep the guy that looks just like me and is an inch taller. He's from Wisconsin or somewhere. And so I got a phone call the day after the Red Sox won in 2004 and said, we're not going to renew your contract. My question was, well, what does that mean? And Mike Fitzpatrick, at the time the executive director of minor league baseball umpires, said, well, that means you're technically a free agent, but it means your career's over because we're the only organization you can sign with. And I said, okay, thanks. What do I do? And what I didn't realize is how consuming sports can be at a professional level, as well as an Olympic level, because I've seen my sister's friends go through this as well. And some of them continue to go through this 20 years after their careers have been over, where adjusting to life in the real world. When I was released, I was a week away from closing on a condo in Scottsdale, because that would provide me another month of being at home during the season. I'd go to spring training, I'd just stay there. It'd be great, the Giants were right down the road. I could get Giant spring training and be home in 5 minutes after games were over in the morning. And I got the phone call, and so the first thing I did was I told my dad and cried about it. And then I had to call my friends, because we're all getting our year-end reports. And it was, hey, how'd you do? What was your ranking? They rank umpires. And they'd say, oh, looks like I'm going to go to the Texas League. That's good. And what about you? Yeah, I got released. The thing they don't tell you about athletes, you're so focused on getting to the next level, even as an umpire. It's not an athlete. It's a skill that is involved with sports, very similar culture though, is you're focused on getting to that next level and whatever you can do to get there. With an umpire, a lot of times you don't talk to the guy that just got released because that reminds you of what is going to happen. You don't want to know about that part. Just like with a football player, if you're released or you retire, chances are good you're not going to talk to your friends until they go through the same thing. There's a lot of time away. You're not going to hang out in the locker room. Coach doesn't want to see you either. They want to win games. Their job is to win games and stay on the field. And so I began to realize that when I walked off the field, and so I started scouting. I wanted to be a baseball lifer. It's too much fun chewing tobacco and telling stories that weren't true. And I'm sitting in Colorado Springs one day, finished college, and I'm watching Brung Young Kim pitch. He pitched for the Diamondbacks when they won the World Series, submariner, from Korea originally, has a fastball, 90-92, slider that doesn't move, but he calls it a slider, and a changeup. And I watched this guy pitch 15 games in a row. It was terrible. And Dan O'Dowd, at the time the Rockies general manager, sitting behind me, and I'd hound him for a job every time I saw him. And I said, what do I have to do for you to hire me? And he goes, I don't know, go to law school. Seems like everybody else does. Great. Now, my sister's a lawyer. I didn't ask her about it. I instead went home and typed into the internet, how do I go to law school? Something about the LSAT, so I signed up for the LSAT. And then I landed in San Diego. And it was as if the heavens had opened up and blessed me. Just, oh my gosh. So why would I ever go anywhere else? So went to law school, and I thought, well, I'll go back into baseball after I'm done. Well, I graduated law school, and I said, well, I should take the bar because that's what you do. Well, after I passed the bar, I went, I should practice. Just see what that's like. And then I realized that instead of going into the baseball operations department, make 30 grand a year working 70 hours a week, why don't I just be everybody's boss? And I'll be a lawyer. And I liked that because now I get to solve problems for people. I worked at a firm, best piece of advice I ever got. After I graduated, I'm at Sports Lawyers Association conference in Phoenix. And I asked Don Fear, who at the time, I believe Don was with the Hockey Players Association. I think he had transferred out of baseball at that point. Now, if any of you met Don Fear, he is not a person to sugarcoat anything, and he's rather abrasive. And I said, Don, why won't anybody hire me? It's 2010, like lawyers are jumping out of windows. Dreierstein had just gone under. All hell was breaking loose. And he goes, go be a good lawyer and then call me. He goes, don't bitch about not being able to get a job that you want as a vice president of anything right now. He goes, go be a lawyer, go sit in the copy room for a couple of years and come back. Okay, so I joined a firm in Century City in Los Angeles that didn't do anything involving sports. And 2 years and 1 day into that, I left. I wanted to handle my own stuff. And what I found was that athletes have a lot of issues. And I found that out by dealing with sports officials first. I told everybody I was going out on my own. Big email list was a bunch of major league umpires. So I handled a family law issue here. I handled a small business issue there. One guy owned a bar, so I handled some of those interesting issues. And I realized that that's a lot more fun. I get to know these guys. Because on the field stuff, it's very limited. And it's a general contract that there's not a lot of negotiating with it. The amount of money involved and the perks are. But those issues can take care of themselves. The athletes generally don't always want to be deeply involved with that. But even with these umpires, they'd refer me business to players. My card would get passed around. And that was nice. I was also working with small businesses, and I still work with small businesses as well. And entrepreneurs would teach me the lessons to give these athletes. Now, the reason that that's important is these athletes don't typically have the life skills or the business savvy because they've never been taught it. I mean, an average career of an athlete, right? Let's take a look at it. It only lasts 20, maybe 30 years from the time they're born till the time they stop playing professionally. They're born, they go to t-ball or soccer or whatever their chosen sport is. They probably start between 5 and 8, right? You know, they're running around and, oh man, he's the fastest kid on the team. Oh, isn't he cute? Well, you know, that lasts for a little bit, but about the time they're 9 or 10, kids separate themselves. You know who the best kid in the league is. And sometimes his dad played in the NFL or her mom played in the WNBA, but they're very recognizable. They're the fastest kid. They throw 1,000 miles an hour when everybody else can't get it to the plate. Kid can kick a soccer ball halfway down the field. Other kids can't do that. The NCAA now, you're 13 years old, you're on their radar. They know who you are. Rivals.com will rank 13-year-olds. That's crazy. And a kid who's 11 got offered a scholarship to USC. Okay, that's the landscape we live in now. You're playing college ball. This is 18 to 21 maybe. These kids in the NCAA tournament, they're 6 guys from Kentucky are going to leave the second they lose or after they win to go to the NBA. I think the oldest one was 20 years old. They're going to go in the NBA draft. So let's say you're 21 by the time you enter the league. So 21, 22, you're entering professional sports. About that same time, every one of these guys, every single one, every professional women's soccer player, every women's WNBA player, you name the sport, the athlete is going to suffer their first major injury within their first 2 years. Whether they report it or not is a whole different story. That's the reality of it. It's about staying on the field. In college, it was, you're still the best person, you're still the best player. Okay, well, why don't we get you surgery, tape up your ankle, take a couple weeks off, we'll get you back out there. Well, now, at the professional level, everybody's about the same talent level. Some exceptions, but they'll get rid of you in a heartbeat. And LeBron James has played for 2 different teams. You look at Joe Montana, the 49ers dumped him. Baseball, the old adage is they kicked Babe Ruth out. What do you think they're going to do to you? But at the end of his career, Babe Ruth was a serviceable ball player, but he wasn't Babe Ruth. So they sent him to Boston to play for the Braves, sit the bench, have a nice day. And it's about winning games. It's not about who you were. It's not about your name. If Tom Brady plays long enough, he might end up playing for the St. Louis, Los Angeles Rams. It's weird. I'm a Bronco fan. Peyton Manning in a Bronco uniform is so weird to me. It's going to look like Willie Mays with the Mets. Then his career, it's just odd. But that's the reality. They're just trying to win games. And if they can replace you, they will. And typically by the time these guys are 24 to maybe 28, if they're lucky, it's time to go. Time to find yourself a new job. Now, if you're in college and you're an athlete, I can tell you from firsthand experience that if you want to go to the University of Alabama, at the old scoring system of the SAT, it was 1600 was perfect. I don't know what it is now. But if you got an 800, you get 600 points for signing up your name. You get an 800 and you have a 2.0 in high school, you can go be an athlete at the University of Alabama. If you have a 1.6, they'll put you on probation for a year, you can still play. You got to get your grades up. You can be a general studies major at the University of Alabama for 3 years before you have to declare your major. Now, if I'm a football, baseball, basketball player, and I'm at Alabama, what are the odds I'm getting to my 4th year if I'm really good? Probably very little. General studies is, I was a communications major, which I always tell people that it gives me a degree in pouring beer and making friends. Now, that's not necessarily true. I can speak publicly and form a sentence. But if you're a general studies major, it means you get to take whatever classes you want. That's a problem when you're 28 and now you have no business skills. When you're in high school, you take that math test, you might miss 6 out of 10, but yeah, all right, well, that answer might be something else. He's really good, and I know he didn't have enough time to study because that team played out of town this week. You know what? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and think he got that right. It's human nature. I'm not trying to criticize teachers. That's the way it is right now. Even right now. It was worse 20 years ago.